March 10th, 2017. That's when Nvidia launched this GPU right here, the GTX 1080 Ti. Little did they know the release of the 1080 Ti would preemptively shoot themselves in the foot when it came time to release something significantly better at the same price point. Just how well has the 1080 Ti held up though? I mean, 2.5 years is a long time, and there have been a lot of new enthusiast GPUs releasing at the moment. So how does this thing compare to like a 2070 Super or 2080 Super? And also, is this thing worth buying used? Let's say you can get this for $500 US or maybe $450 US. Is that really worth it over something like a 5700 XT? That's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so the GPU landscape has changed quite a bit since the 1080 Ti first launched. Most of that has happened in the last few months. At the moment, you can consistently find 1080 Ti deals on the used market for between $450 to $550 US, potentially less if you get lucky with an auction. That currently has it priced around the RTX 2070 Super brand new, which you can find easily on Amazon for that price. We also have the new RX 5700 XT from AMD, which offers slightly lower performance on average to the 2070 Super, but at just $400 US. So overall, you do have plenty of new options if you are looking for a powerful GPU at the moment. So the 1080 Ti was one of the fastest Pascal GPUs before the Titan XPP came along, and at the moment it's still the fastest GTX card that exists. Of course, as we know, about a year or so later, things went south pretty quickly when RTX arrived, and during that time, the 1080 Ti was used as an example of what should have been and how to do things right. One of the biggest spec differences between the 1080 Ti and the enthusiast RTX cards is that the older GTX card does have a lower clocked memory, though its advantage against competing cards comes down to its brute compute performance, boasting 3,584 CUDA cores. It also has an additional 3 GB of memory over its successors, but the actual effect that has on gaming, even at 4K, is limited. The specific model that we're looking at here is the 1080 Ti SC2 from EVGA. It's a 2-slot card with dual fans and a shroud design that everyone loves to hate. When I bought this card about 2 years ago, I paid 1,150 Australian dollars, which worked out to be around 800 to 850 US at the time, but over in the US market, this card usually sat around the $750 mark. We will be looking at overclocked gaming benchmarks as well, where I was able to achieve a core offset of plus 60 MHz and a memory offset of plus 700 MHz. This seems pretty average and about what you can expect to OC a fairly typical 1080 Ti. So starting with Project Cars 2, this title plays fairly well on the Pascal architecture. We're seeing the 1080 Ti about 4% faster than the original RTX 2080 and a little over 1% slower than the RTX 2080 Super. This was one of the better titles for the GTX GPU. If you plan on playing at 1440p or 4K in games that utilize high resolution textures, you will see the RTX cards take a slight lead due to the faster memory. The RTX 2080 Super, when overclocked for example, takes a 16.5% lead over the overclocked 1080 Ti in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and this is because the 2080 Super can easily achieve a memory overclock of up to 18 gigabits per second. In the case of Apex Legends, I actually saw the 1080 Ti get beaten by the 2070 Super. Not really sure why this was. It could be due to the concurrent integer and floating point compute advantage that the Turing cards have. The RX 5700 XT also looks extremely good in this title for the money. In Battlefield 5 running on DX12, the 1080 Ti was a little over 7% slower than the RTX 2080 Super and around 2% slower than the RTX 2080. The lowest 1% of FPS for the 1080 Ti comes up a little short here as well. It's a different architecture and memory configuration, so it's not too uncommon to see these slight differences. Fortnite shows some pretty interesting results. Here we have the 1080 Ti coming in at 2.6% faster than the standard 2080 and about 7.5% slower than the 2080 Super. And as expected, there's around a 4 to 8% bump in performance when you factor in the overclock, depending on the game. Most of the time that should bring you up to around 2080 Super performance or slightly above. Warhammer Vermintide 2 has the 1080 Ti about on par with the regular 2080, with 1% lows just 3% behind. So pretty expected performance here too. Similar story in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. In fact, the 2070 Super, 1080 Ti, 2080 and 2080 Super all have pretty tightly packed performance here, all managing between 72 and 76 FPS on average at 1440p. So really, the standard 2080 and the GTX 1080 Ti will trade places depending on the title, with the 2070 Super not far behind and the 5700 XT from AMD not too far behind that. Like I said in the intro, we do have quite a few options if you are looking for a 1440p capable gaming GPU at the moment. Rainbow Six Siege, as we've seen previously, plays really well on RTX hardware. Here even the RTX 2070 Super has a 3.2% lead over the 1080 Ti, with the 2080 Super quite a few slots up the stack at around 16% faster. So do take note if this is one of your personal favorite games. Lastly, we have Far Cry 5, where the 1080 Ti performs 2% slower than the RTX 2080 and 5% slower than the 2080 Super. The 5700 XT performs exceptionally well in this title, as this is an AMD sponsored game. The 5700 XT comes in 2% faster than the 2070 Super here, with much stronger 1% lows. Power consumption is on the upper end of the stack, slightly above the current 2080 Super. At load, the total system power draw at the wall averaged to 350 watts. So when we take the average of all of those gaming benchmarks, here's what we're looking at. The 1080 Ti comes in 2% under the 2080, 7% under the 2080 Super, and a little under 4% over the 2070 Super. So overall, it's exactly as most of us had expected. The real discussion here is when we translate these numbers into overall value. So here is the final chart that we land on, and if there's only a single chart that I could show you from this entire video, this would definitely be it. So if you can get the 1080 Ti on the used market for $500, that puts the overall value slightly above the 2070 Super, keyword there being slightly. The real breakout here in this stack is the 5700 XT, with a value proposition that just cannot be ignored. You'd have to get a used 1080 Ti for a steal of $425 to match the brand new 5700 XT on value. So if you can get a used 1080 Ti for around $450, then absolutely it's a solid deal. Above that, and I'd personally rather a fresh 5700 XT or maybe a 2070 Super. So if you do currently have a 1080 Ti in your system, definitely take care of it. I don't think you're going to be letting go of it for probably another 2.5 years looking at the GPU market. For those of you who are looking to buy a 1080 Ti used, again, if you can get it for around $450 US, ideally below that, because it's not that much performance over something like a 5700 XT realistically, which you can buy brand new for around $400. At $500 US or more, I don't really think the 1080 Ti is going to be worth buying used. The 2070 Super does come in at that price brand new and does offer pretty close performance depending on the title. My really strong recommendation is to check out the 5700 XT, possibly wait for the add-in board partner cards to come, so that way you won't have any issues with cooling or anything like that. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.